Today I'm going to share with you a fermented ginger ale recipe that's a wonderful probiotic-rich drink that's great for good gut health and a terrific alternative to store-bought ginger ale. Hi sweet friends, I'm Mary and welcome to Mary's Nest, where I teach traditional cooking skills for making nutrient-dense foods like bone broth, sourdough, ferments, and more. So if you enjoy learning about those things, consider subscribing to my channel. And don't forget to click on the little notification bell below. That'll let you know every time I upload a new video. Well, in a previous video, I showed you how to make a ginger bug, which is right in front of us, which is what you need in order to make homemade ginger ale. This is very easy to make, and I'll link to the video in the iCards above and in the description below, so you can watch that and catch up if this is a beverage that you'd like to make. Now, this is the way I usually like to make a ginger bug, where I grate the ginger very finely. But I know some of you said, oh, that's a lot of work. I'm not sure I want to go through all of that. So here today, I've also got a ginger bug to show you where I just chopped up the ginger, and you can do this too. So when you watch that video where I show how to make the ginger bug, know that you don't have to grate it. You can also just chop it up and make it like this. Well, we'll put these aside for a minute because we won't need them until we get to a later step. What we're going to do now is to start making the actual ginger ale. Now, the first thing that you're going to need is some ginger. This is organic ginger, so I'm not going to need to peel it. But if you're using non-organic ginger, I would recommend that you peel it. Now, when it comes to making a homemade fermented ginger ale, there really is a lot of leeway on the ingredients, or I should say the amount of ingredients that you want to add to the beverage that you're making. Now, today, I'm only going to make a quart of fermented ginger ale, but you can certainly adjust this recipe all the ways up to making an entire gallon. And I recommend the first time that you make this that you start with a quart. And the reason is making homemade fermented ginger ale really has a lot of variables. How much ginger you use, how much sugar you use, how much lemon juice you use. Yes, we're going to put in a little lemon juice that it helps with the flavor of this beverage. But all of those things can vary depending on the taste that you're looking for, the ultimate taste of the final product that you're looking for. So for this recipe today, as I said, I'm just going to make a quart, and that's what I recommend that you start with as well to determine the flavor that you like. I love ginger, and so I'm going to use a substantial piece here to make just a quart of fermented ginger ale. But if you're starting out, I would recommend using something maybe even just this size, something that if we broke all these pieces off and put them one on top of the other, might be about 4 inches. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just start chopping up this ginger, and you just want to chop it quite finely. And when I get this all chopped up, I'll take a picture and I'll put the picture, I've got a piece getting away from me, I'll overlay a picture so you can see exactly the size of the ginger that I'm cutting this into. Well, now I've got this ginger all chopped up, and I'm going to go ahead and put it right into this pot here. And now to this, I'm going to add a little more than 4 cups of water, which is 1 quart. But I'm just going to add a little more since we're going to be bringing this up to a boil and letting it simmer for a bit, just to allow for evaporation so that in the end we have 1 quart. Now I'm going to turn this up to high. I'm going to bring it up to a boil. Once it comes up to a boil, I'm going to turn it down to medium high so that it simmers, but at a fairly good high simmer. And I'm going to let that simmer for about 10 minutes. Now, again, as I said, with ingredients, the amount of ingredients we use, it can be flexible based on taste, so on and so forth. The amount of time that you simmer your ginger can also be flexible. And some people will only maybe boil it for 3 minutes, a hard boil for 3 minutes. Other people will simmer it. There's all kinds of variations if you look up on the internet about making a homemade fermented ginger ale. But what I like to do is I find bring it up to a boil and then turn it down to a simmer, but a high simmer, and let it simmer for about 10 minutes. For me, that creates a nice flavored ginger base to make the fermented ginger ale. And so what I'm sharing with you today is a place for you to get started with this recipe. And once you make this once, you'll tweak it to get to the flavor that you like. Hopefully you'll like this flavor, but if you want it a little stronger, a little weaker, whatever the case may be, this will give you the basics for how to make it, and then you can tweak the flavor to get it exactly the way you like it. So we'll let this come up to a boil, and then we'll let it simmer for at a high simmer for 10 minutes. Well, I let the ginger in the water simmer for about 10 minutes, and now we're going to get ready to add in our sugar. Now, for making a quart of this fermented ginger ale, I'm going to use about 1/3 cup of sugar. You can use a little less, you can use a little more. Again, as I said, with this recipe, I'm just going to show you what I do, but then after you make this quart, you'll get a feel for whether or not you want to add more or less sugar. The sugar I've got here is called sucanat. You may also see it by the name rapadura, or sometimes just dried cane juice. That's exactly what it is. It's just the sugar cane juice dried. In addition to being sweet, it also provides a lot of minerals, and that helps with the fermentation process. So if you decide to use white cane sugar, be sure to add maybe a teaspoon or so of molasses into your mixture, because that will help with the fermentation. So I'm going to go ahead and add all of this in now and stir it around until it's completely dissolved. And now what we're going to do is, now that the sugar is dissolved in here, we're just going to strain this to just strain out the ginger. And don't worry, because we added a little more than a quart of water to this process, but even so, with evaporation and whatnot, it will be less than the 4 cups, the 1 quart, but that's okay, because as you'll see as we proceed with this recipe, we're going to be adding in some of the ginger bug, some of the liquid from the ginger bug. So eventually we'll be up to 1 quart. Now that we've got our liquid all strained, we're going to let this cool down to room temperature, and then we'll proceed to the next step. Now our ginger water sugar mixture has come down to room temperature, so now we're ready to measure out some of the liquid from our ginger bug to get ready to make the fermented soda. Now I just want to say a word about the ginger bug. In the previous video where I showed you how to make the ginger bug, I explained that it takes about 5 days to the point where it's nice and bubbly and ready to be used to make a fermented soda. Now, if after those 5 days you're not ready to use it to make a fermented soda with, you have a couple of options. You can leave it on your counter and continue to feed it every day, or you can put it in your refrigerator and feed it once a week. In many ways, maintaining a ginger bug is not unlike maintaining a sourdough starter. If you decide to put it in your refrigerator, you'll want to feed it every week. And when you take it out of your fridge, you'll want to remove a little bit of the liquid, a little bit of the ginger, and you'll want to feed it with, in this case where it's chopped, about 2 tablespoons of chopped ginger, and about a tablespoon of white cane sugar, and a little bit of water. And that's it. And then you can just stir it real well and put it back in your fridge. If you like to leave it on your counter because you think you may be making fermented sodas on a regular basis, then you'll just do the same thing. You'll remove some of the liquid, remove some of the ginger, and then add some fresh ginger, add a little fresh sugar, cane sugar, preferably white cane sugar. It works best with the ginger bug. And then add in a little bit of water. And I go over all about the ginger bug in more detail in that video, which I'll link to in the iCards and in the description below, so you can learn more about it. Well, now I'll just go ahead and measure out about 1/4 cup. And now we'll just go ahead and add our ginger bug right into our sugar water ginger mix. And then I like to add in about the juice of 1 lemon. You can leave this out if you want, but I think it gives it a nice flavor. And we'll just give this a nice stir to incorporate everything. Before I show you how to bottle this up, I just want to share with you a little bit about fermented ginger ale and its history. Today we know it, is a little lighter in color and something that we see, that we can buy at the grocery store or whatnot. But this was originally made as a traditional food, a rich, probiotic-rich fermented beverage, and often given to people to help combat nausea. And it was very commonly used when people would have the flu, because nausea would often accompany the flu, and this would not only help sort of quell that nausea, it would also, it being fermented beverage enriched in probiotics, would help nourish their gut and give them some wonderful probiotics to try to help and fight off the flu. So I always find it interesting learning about the history of traditional foods, and specifically in this case, traditional fermented probiotic-rich beverages. Alrighty, well, we've got this all mixed and now it's ready to decant, and we need to talk about that. Now we're going to want to bottle this up and put this aside for a couple of days in order for the fermentation to develop, which is what's going to make this a fizzy drink, a homemade soda. What happens is when we bottle this up, the yeast and the bacteria are going to go to work and they're going to eat the sugar that's in here, and then it's going to give off CO2, carbon dioxide, and that's what creates all of the effervescence, the fizziness in this beverage. Now, when some people make a homemade soda, a fermented soda like this, they like to put it into these bottles that have these little swing top type lids. I'll take a close-up picture of this swing top bottle so that you can see exactly what it looks like. And these are generally used when people want to bottle a fermented beverage and really capture all that CO2 to make it very fizzy. So you can put your homemade fermented ginger ale in here, or you can just put it in a quart-sized canning jar like this with using a plastic storage lid. Now, if you decide you want to put your homemade ginger ale in a swing top bottle like this, there's a couple precautions that you want to take. Number one, you want to make sure that you have a high quality swing top bottle, one that you buy from companies that sell bottles for bottling fermented beverages that are going to become highly carbonated. They need to be a very thick-walled glass and have a very strong swing top cap. That said, once you pour your soda in here and you put the cap on, you're going to leave it on the counter for a couple of days to allow the fermentation process to take place and to allow the CO2 to begin to build up. Then, after a couple of days, you're going to want to transfer it to your refrigerator. Now, in working with these and working with something that is going to be releasing CO2, I highly recommend that you put this, even when you're letting it ferment on your counter, and then again when you move it to your refrigerator, I recommend putting this in some type of container, some type of like plastic, Tupperware, I don't know what they call, Rubbermaid, one of those type containers, so that if this breaks, and people have had them break on them, if this breaks, it's contained in that container and doesn't make a mess of your kitchen or your refrigerator. And all of that said, I personally, and again, do your research on all of this, I don't like bottling in these, and I don't do it. If you do decide that you want to do it, I would recommend that every day you have it on your counter, you open it up and let a little bit of the gas out. Now, does that affect the level of carbonation that it's going to have? Yes. However, once it goes into your refrigerator and the fermentation is a little slower, it's going to be plenty carbonated. That's just my little bit of safety tip. But as I said, I don't like working with these, and I feel that soda, even fermented soda, is a treat. So once it's fizzy enough, made in a quart-sized canning jar like this, or a half a gallon size canning jar if you want to make more, drink it and enjoy it. And don't worry so much about bottling it. I find these a little precarious, so I don't like using that. But I wanted to show you in case this is something you want to experiment with. And if you do your research. And the one tip I can give you is make sure, they're expensive, but make sure you buy high quality bottles made for bottling fermented beverages that are going to produce a lot of CO2. So instead of the swing top bottles, what I like to do is to simply use a quart-sized canning jar. And I'll add this in, I'll pour the fermented soda that we're making, the homemade ginger ale, in the process. I'll pour that into here. I'll put my lid on and I'll leave this in a warm place. We'll talk about in a minute about how many days it's going to take. I'll leave it in a warm place in my kitchen for a couple of days. As I see it getting more and more fizzy and bubbly, I will release some of the gases, as I do, with my fermented foods. Also, if you want, as I've shared with you, sometimes I'll put just a canning lid and then a canning ring, because sometimes I like to just be able to use a little can opener to release the canning lid. I find that a little easier. Sometimes even releasing this, it can be like, poof, a little bit of a surprise. And another option is if you want to have a little more individual sized portions, you can just use jars like this, or actually bottles like this that just have a screw top lid. And I believe they sell these on Amazon or something similar. These are simply used, this is a used bottle that I had from a store-bought kombucha. So, and those of you who know me have heard my kombucha story, which I'll share another day. But I don't like to make homemade kombucha. I like to make homemade water kefir, and homemade fermented sodas like this. But me and kombucha and the SCOBY, we had a little adventure once. But in any event, so you can pour the soda in here and do the same thing. Just put your lid on. And then I'm going to leave it in a warm place for a couple of days. And as I said, as you start seeing all that carbonation building up, just loosen a little bit, let out some of that carbonation, some of that CO2 that's building up, and then put your lid back on. Now, that said, how many days are we going to let this ferment on the counter? Again, just like the ingredients, how much ginger, how much sugar, so on and so forth that you like to use in terms of get the taste that you want, the fermentation and the development of the fermentation will depend on the time of year, the temperature in your kitchen, so on and so forth. If it's very warm in your kitchen, it'll ferment quicker. If it's cooler in your kitchen, it'll ferment slower. So you can be looking at anywhere as quickly as 2 days to really start seeing some bubbling, to maybe 6 or even a little past that. It's really going to be a matter of time of year, temperature, so on and so forth. Just start looking for those bubbles. And then, after 2 days, if you see a lot of carbonation, give it a taste and see if you like it. Let it go 3, 4, 5 days, whatever you feel is necessary to get the level of carbonation that you want and the taste that you like. The longer you leave it to ferment, the less sweet it's going to be. But it is, sorry, this is funny, but there is a sweet spot, so to speak, as to when will be the perfect time for you to refrigerate it. So you don't want to wait too long, because at some point the fermentation will slow down. And then you may start to lose, especially since you're going to be letting a little carbonation out every day, a little bit of the CO2 out every day. And at some point, the good bacteria won't have anything left to eat anymore. And so then it can almost start to go flat. So once you see it getting a good carbonation, a good level of bubbling, a nice flavor, not too sweet, but not too tangy either, then you've reached your sweet spot and your fermented soda is ready to enjoy. And once it's ready, at the amount of carbonation that you like and the flavor that you like, you can refrigerate it to chill it down and then enjoy it pretty much that same day. Or you can take it right at room temperature, drink it like that if that's what you enjoy, or pour it over ice. Either way, any of those ways will work just fine. But using this type of vessel to store it in, it will lose carbonation over time. So if you want to keep it really carbonated, you'd need to use one of these swing top bottles. But as I shared with you, I'm not a fan. And I really feel this is a treat, and it's not something that I would recommend making a lot of and making on a regular basis. I think if you're looking for some sort of fermented beverage that is probiotic rich, that you want to drink on a more regular basis, then I'm a fan of water kefir, but you also have milk kefir. Actually, that milk kefir is my favorite, but in terms of this sort of more like soda-y type beverages, there's water kefir, there's kombucha. Fermented sodas are a little sweeter than the water kefir and the kombucha, so I really see this as more of a treat. So my attitude about all of this is make it, bottle it in something like this, and when it's ready, enjoy it. So I'm just going to give this another stir, make sure everything's incorporated. Looks good. And now I'm going to go ahead and put it in my quart-sized canning jar. So fill your quart-sized jar and just fill it up to right at the neck there. Leave a little headspace. And then put your canning storage lid on. Just nice and tight. And now you're going to put this in a warm place, and after 2 days, take a look at it, see if you're getting some fizz. If it's nothing dramatic, you don't really need to loosen this. Just keep watching for it. Maybe on the 3rd day, you start seeing a lot more fizz. Loosen it, retighten it, and then as it gets more and more fizzy, give it a taste. You know, you can even taste it on the 2nd day, especially if your kitchen is warm. We're going into the summer months now. This is a great time to make a fermented soda for a treat. So if you find after 2 days it's really looking fizzy, give it a taste. See how the carbonation is and the sweetness level. And if you like it, great, enjoy it. If not, give it a 3rd day, and so on and so forth. If you'd like to learn more about making traditional foods, like fermented beverages, be sure to subscribe to my channel, and then click on this video over here where I show you how to make water kefir. And I'll see you over there in my Texas Hill Country kitchen. Love and God bless.